Everybody, it's Brit Hartley at No Nonsense Spirituality. I took a little break there. I was studying at a Hindu temple in Kauai, and I'm still gathering my notes for that for a longer video that I'll do next. But I just wanted to talk today about a fun little thought experiment I've been thinking about lately as I'm currently being tested for autism. And we're going to go pretty deep here on autism really acting as the control group to help us understand religion better, and this question of whether or not autism can help us disprove religion as quote unquote true. So I have heard on places like TikTok, people talking about autism and God in the sense that, like, why would God create autistic people when they are more likely to not believe and therefore more likely to go to hell in certain religions? And I've heard that conversation, but I want to go a lot deeper than that. The deeper question I want to ask is, do autism traits predict lower belief in God? And if so, why? And what does that tell us about religion and how it evolved in neurotypical brains if we are using autistic people as the control group? And that led to some very interesting findings that I'm thinking about. So first, as a disclaimer, autism is a spectrum. Religiosity is a spectrum. Religious belief is not one thing. Sometimes it's hard to measure religious belief because, are we measuring your belief in a personal God? Are we measuring attendance? Some measure belief in the supernatural. Some define spirituality, more loosely. So we're going to be painting in some broad strokes that by definition will not include everyone, just to see if there's any general statements that we can make here, and then what those general statements say about religion and why we as a species are religious. So let's take a look at the data that we have and then see what conclusions that we can make. But of course, this will not include everyone. So one of the most cited papers here is Mentalizing Deficits, Constrained Belief in a Personal God. And across multiple studies, they report an inverse relationship between autism spectrum and belief in God. And they report that autism scores inversely predicted the belief in God. And they explicitly conclude that they found evidence for an inverse link explained by mentalizing. Now, notice what this does and does not prove. It doesn't disprove God. It certainly doesn't disprove religion. It just says that belief in a personal God is cognitively easier when your social brain is running as the default mode rather than kind of your analytical brain running your default mode network as an autistic person. So there's also an influential paper by Caldwell-Harris and colleagues that is often summarized as showing higher atheism/agnosticism in high-functioning autism. And we have a secondary paper that summarizes the Caldwell-Harris's sample and findings. It's peer-reviewed so that we can cite it directly. And it found that autistic participants were more likely to be atheist or build their own religious system. They still often considered themselves spiritual, but they just didn't, like, whatever everybody else was doing in church was just not hitting as strongly. So they were more likely to build their own spiritual or religious system, or be agnostic, or be atheist, or be into mysticism, or be into the God of Spinoza, the God of Einstein, a more naturalistic God, but not be really involved with the organized religion part of religion. Now, a caveat there, when autistic people are religious, they tend towards fundamentalism. So they tend to be more black and white in their thinking. They tend to just take the religion seriously and not do a lot of mental gymnastics to soften it for social reasons that we see neurotypical people do. But they are more likely to be atheist, agnostic, build their own religious system than they are to be fundamentalist. And so the data often looks like a U, where you have more likely to be fundamentalist, more likely to be atheist or doing your own spiritual thing, but not a lot in the middle where you're just kind of doing what everybody around you is doing, and you kind of believe, but you kind of don't, but you still go to church. That's more of the neurotypical area that we just don't see as much atheists in the data. Now, none of this proves that religion is false or that God isn't real, but what we can say is that if autism traits predict lower belief in a personal God, that's evidence that religious belief is scaffolded by social cognition and group learning, not by purely independent rational thinking. So I want to go down another level here and really talk about, why is it that autism predicts a lower belief in a personal God? That's the question that I find interesting. And there was more here than I thought there would be at first. So most religious belief is acquired through imitation, trust in authority, communal reinforcement, identity signaling, emotional synchronicity, and autistic cognition patterns are less permeable to these kinds of mechanisms. They're less affected by what everybody else is doing and all of this identity signaling and all of these social constraints. And so what this does is it strongly suggests that religion functions less like a metaphysical truth that people are discovering independently and more like a social construct that autistic people are just less affected by, less moved by. But it goes an even deeper level than just the social aspect of organized religion. It goes to the very depths of why religion exists at all. So religious belief strongly correlates with agency detection and kind of assuming that there is intentionality outside of you. So let me go into this. The best guess for why we are religious in the first place is that we evolved to be superstitious and we evolved to apply agency to agents outside of us. Meaning for neurotypical people, if there was a rustling in the bushes a long time ago, we're talking hundreds of thousands of years ago, if you could imagine, go into an imaginal space and imagine that a tiger rustled those bushes, and then you would run, you would be more likely to survive. And in this sense, a false negative is not very costly. There wasn't a tiger there, you ran away anyway. You know, that's not a huge cost. So we are the descendants of superstitious, on-edge people, because when they could imagine something around them causing harm or being a danger, it kept them on their toes better than those who just kind of sat around and only ran when they actually saw the tiger. So we are the descendants of superstitious ancestors who survived. And the byproduct of that is that we don't just do this for tigers and dangers. We started to do this for everything because our brains got good at doing this. So when there was a storm that didn't seem like it would stop, it like our brains evolved in such a way that it felt like some agent is causing that storm. And because it kind of feels like anger or punishment from a God that could utilize such weapons, we started to think that thunder and lightning was caused by another agent that was mad at us. And you can notice this behavior in humans today. I see it everywhere. I literally see this behavior every day. We put faces on cars in the Cars movies. We think the printer is like actually conspiring against us. We imagine personalities to completely inanimate objects. Disney does this all the time. Toys are alive. The cars are alive. The animals are human-like. The grandmother Willow talks to us. It's everywhere. And we're used to it because this is normal human behavior. But imagine explaining that to an alien, that as humans, we kind of imagine everything around us having an imaginary motive or personality behind it. We didn't have to evolve that way. This is the byproduct of that superstitious behavior of imagining the tiger in the grass. That's the impulse that creates religion. And then on top of that impulse, there's all these social and psychological things that religion does to fortify itself. So everybody else is doing it too. Shared rituals, you start singing together and syncing up. Psychologically, you know, there's ways to cheat death and it starts doing more and more. But that first jump into religion is what we call HADD, yeah. Or no, HAAD, hyperactive agency detection is what it is. Humans evolved to over detect agency because false positives are cheaper than false negatives. So evolution favors superstition, pattern seeking, intent, attributing, emotion projecting onto the outside world. And religion is a byproduct of our tendency to do this. And we don't just detect agency, we detect intent. So humans don't just think like someone caused this drought. We think someone meant this, right? Like storms feel angry or punitive or communicative. And because that's our same brain system used to read facial expressions and tone and threat and social hierarchy, we start using that part of our brain for natural phenomena. So thunder feels like rage and drought feels like punishment and blessings feel personal, and religion piggybacks on that social emotion. And children, this is so important. Children do this before religion is taught to them. That is a huge underused point. Developmental psychology consistently finds that children naturally attribute purpose to objects. They assume that that things exist for something, that events have intention. So kids will say mountains are for animals to climb. Sun is there to keep us warm. Someone made everything. And that happens before religious instruction. That happens in secular children. That happens, with children who are grown up in atheist households. So we're actually born more with a natural tendency to religion than we are born, atheist or critical thinkers. And I will debate atheists who say that religion is just indoctrination. Sometimes Richard Dawkins talks this way because it's deeper than that. The tendencies that religion maps onto show up in children across the board as our natural evolved way of thinking. But autism is different, and that gives us a control group. For many autistic people, they do not have that same cognitive bias that intuitively assumes hidden intention. They are not as prone, even as children, to default to someone meant this, or there's a personal motive behind events. This doesn't mean that they have no imagination or no wonder or no spirituality. It just means that they are less reflexive in their anthropomorphism. So storms are more likely to be weather systems to study and impersonal processes rather than messages or expressions of divine will or punishments. And so religious gods, especially personal gods, when we talk about theism, not deism as much, but theism, a lot of that requires imagining a mind that you can't see and imagining that it's tracking your beliefs and your desires and expectations, assuming that it's monitoring you. So autistic people often don't have, even as children, that tendency to over anthropomorphize, which you often need for theism to really work, to have a foundation for theism to build on. That's why sometimes you will hear autistic people say, I was 5 years old and religion just didn't make any sense to me. It's because they have a different cognitive wiring system that religion doesn't build on as strongly as a foundation. So on top of that foundational mismatch of just not assuming that the storm means that God is talking to you, religion is also reinforcing belief through communal emotion and synchronicity and ritual and shared narratives. And autistic people are often less influenced by those group kind of emotional contagions. They're less comforted by this sense of symbolic belonging. They're more resistant to, we all feel this together, therefore it's true. It doesn't make them cold. It just makes them less socially suggestible. And so those two main differences, the lack of overplaying intention and the lack of being as socially suggestible, means that autistic people are more likely than neurotypical people. Doesn't mean that they're never religious, just more likely than neurotypical people to be atheist or agnostic and to not do well in especially that gray area of religion where like some things are true, some things are not, and participating in it, but I don't really believe it sometimes. Like that area tends to be not as populated by autistic people. But there's an important nuance here, and that is that although autistic people may not be as present in social forms of religion, autistic people are not immune to spirituality. What often changes is the form of spirituality. So what changes can be, there'll be maybe a less personal God, a less anthropomorphic deity, more kind of abstract awe, more cosmic or pattern-based senses of wonder, more interest in systems or laws or impersonal transcendence. And this is why mysticism, non-dualism, philosophical awe, cosmic naturalism, some of these resonate more than church-style religion. So autistic people absolutely can consider themselves spiritual or experience awe, be very drawn to mysticism, but they just don't tend to really be socially pressured to believe in this personal God that has this like tally marker in heaven that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so the strongest takeaway that we have here with this data is not that religion is false. I don't think that we can conclude that well. We could maybe whisper towards that, but I don't think you can really, there's no smoking gun here that you could just say religion is false. What you can say is that religious belief drops when that social default or that superstitious default changes, especially in neurodiverse people, and it suggests that religion exists in the way that it does in the world today because it evolved from agency detection and social intuitions and pressures, not the way, it's not discovered the way that math or physics is. If we lost all the science textbooks, this is something Ricky Gervais says, if we lost all the science textbooks, we would rediscover them, we would rewrite them all. If we lost religious texts, we would create new religions, but they would be different. We wouldn't rediscover Christianity if the Bible disappeared from memory. So in conclusion, our best guess for why humans are religious is that we're especially good at imagining agents. If the bushes rustled and you imagined a tiger, you survived. If you waited for proof, you didn't. So we are descended from nervous, imaginative, pattern-seeking people. The problem is we didn't turn that system off once the tiger problem was solved. Our brains, our bodies are still, operating in a world that no longer really exists. And so we're still applying agency everywhere. Storms, fate, luck, the universe. Looking at the one that bothers me the most is like, I looked at the microwave and it said 11:11 or whatever it is, and the universe is telling me something. And it's like, it really isn't though. It really isn't though. And thunder can feel angry. Drought feels punitive. Like not too long ago, we were talking about how the AIDS, epidemic was something that was caused by God. Like we do this all the time. We yell at our printers. We think that the universe is sending us messages and bumper stickers. That impulse, hyperactive agency detection, is the root of religion. And what's interesting to me about autism is that because many autistic brains don't default to that kind of social projection, they're less likely to imagine hidden intention behind natural events. They're less likely to anthropomorphize the world. That doesn't mean that autistic people are less intelligent. It just makes them less vulnerable to one of the cognitive shortcuts and cognitive biases that religion, specifically theism, depends on. And so for one, why would God create autistic people who don't have the impulse towards worship? If you do believe in a personal God, like why would God create autistic people? And two, what does it say about religion if it changes the nature of religion when you change the brain? When you have a neurodivergent brain, religions start to change. What does that mean? Like, what would organized religion be like if everyone was autistic? And that is super interesting for me to consider, because there would be very hardcore cults that are black and white, and this is capital T true, and preppers, and like you would get fundamentalist forms of religion for sure. And then you would also get a lot of people just like really doing their own thing when it comes to spirituality. But I think the thing that you wouldn't get if everyone was autistic is you wouldn't get like, I'm just Catholic-ish because everyone around me is Catholic-ish, or I'm in Utah, so I'm kind of Mormon and I kind of believe and I kind of don't, and I go to church, but sometimes I disagree with things, and that kind of religion. I think that aspect of religion would go away if everybody was autistic. But what I appreciate about autistic people is that the data shows, they are more likely to be fundamentalists if they are religious because they're taking the religion seriously if they're in it. And then they're more likely to be spiritual but not religious compared to neurotypical people. And they just aren't as present in the data in that in-between space where you go to church kind of for social pressure and do a lot of like identity, pressures and modeling for each other, that kind of stuff. I think that would go away if everybody was autistic. And so it's an interesting thought experiment to consider. What does that tell us about religion? So there's something in there that I just kind of respect. I respect that they take it seriously if they're in it, or they toss it out and build their own spiritual path because they're less likely to be pressured socially or through authoritarian means. They don't just do what everybody else does, even if it doesn't make sense. There's something in that I just kind of respect. But what do you think, and how does this map on to your relationships with autistic people and how they interact with religion? Do you think that there's something that I really missed, or is not present in what I just kind of laid out? Or do you come to different conclusions about what autistic people can maybe say about the nature of religion? Just an interesting thought experiment that I was thinking about, but I'm going to gather my notes from my time at the Hindu monastery. And next week, I will be talking about what an atheist does on retreat at a Hindu monastery in Kauai. And it was super interesting and have a lot of takeaways. So I'll be sharing that next week. And I'll be starting to add some guests soon with my co-host, Bill Reel, who I will bring in when I do guests, because I just think it's fun to have more people. Like if you're going to do a conversation, I want to get multiple kind of perspectives there. So lots of fun things happening, hopefully, on this channel for 2026. And let me know anything that you want me to make a video on for 2026. I have a list of things that I want to talk about, but always interested on what you guys are interested in too. So yeah, glad to be back. I took about 3 weeks off there from YouTube and social media. So glad to be back. I kind of missed you guys. You know, some of the comments, it's better to do without. And there was certainly an uptick in my mental health by stepping away from my phone for a while. And then like turned on my phone and we were in a full-on civil war. But I do miss the conversation. And it doesn't seem like a YouTube channel or going on TikTok would be spiritual for me. But for me, taking information and processing it, doing some kind of thought experiment and processing it in my brain and then putting it out to the world and seeing what you guys come up with, it's a connective experience for me. So I hope you guys comment and let me know what you'd love to see videos on, or if you had a response to this video, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks guys. Bye.